Okay, guys, I know I am not in the frame right now because you guys don't need to see my ugly face anyway at the moment. But anyways, I wanted to go over the AR gas system because in previous video we talked about why we chose a carbine gas system for your SHTF rifle, and the best way I could do it, forgive my very poor diagram, but I was never an artist. But basically, there's a lot of things that I think people don't necessarily understand fully how this gas system actually works. And I mean, down to the truest form, which is why you choose a certain gas system over another. So this is kind of what I wanted to go over real quick. A lot of you guys probably already know this. The few of you that don't, I really hope this helps somewhat. But essentially, I hear a lot of people talk about how switching to a piston system, it'll keep your rifle super clean. You know, it pretty much cuts out all of the carbon and whatnot. And that's just not the case. And I'll explain why. Essentially, what you end up with is once the cartridge is fired and is traveling down the bore, the gas exits the gas port and flows back through the gas tube. What that's actually doing is not driving this whole gas carrier, or this whole bolt carrier, I should say, back. But all this is doing is going through your gas tube, through the gas carrier key, and actually going down into an expansion chamber. Okay, that's doing two things. All that's doing is unloading the bolt lugs off of the inside of the barrel extension, while simultaneously pushing the carrier back slightly to start the cam pin movement. So some people think that, oh well, you know, this is your whole gas system and that's what drives your whole gas, your whole bolt carrier back. And that's not correct, because remember, any sort of explosion is omnidirectional. Okay, so that bullet is traveling this way. Okay, part of that explosion is going to go back that way towards your bolt face. So essentially, when that happens in the expansion chamber, and we can see right here, okay, essentially that is forcing, you know, while in battery, your bolt's sitting like that, that is forcing the slightest unloading of pressure off the lugs, okay? And then that's also driving the bolt carrier back. Now the lugs are still engaged at this point. As the bolt carrier starts to go back, what does it do? It starts to rotate the cam pin, which starts to unlock the locking lugs, okay? From that point, it's actually the sheer explosive force coming back through this area that actually drives the bolt carrier back. So if you switch to a piston system, the only thing that's different is it's the piston rod that is striking the flat face here and essentially unlocking the lugs for you, and it's the explosion that's driving it the rest of the way back. Okay, so that's something that I don't know that a lot of people necessarily completely understood. The other thing you hear a lot about, if you guys have never heard this before, is you hear about dwell time. The dwell time is actually the length of the barrel in, now they call it dwell time because what they mean is the travel essentially in milliseconds, that the bullet passes the gas port and how long it takes to get to the end of the muzzle. Obviously this is not to scale, so don't judge me too hard. So if you think about the traditional AR-15 20-inch, the way Eugene Stoner designed it, the gas port is right at about 12 and 3/8 inches, somewhere around there, if I remember correctly. And you have a 20-inch barrel, which means you have that extra 8 inches of barrel to cause your dwell time in order for all of these actions to occur while still getting a complete powder burn. Okay, so if you think about that 8 inches of barrel, your standard M4 is a 7-inch gas system on a 14.5, so you're right around 7.5 inches. You're getting close to that, and that's why the Army, actually Colt, when they originally made the M4, decided to scale back to those measurements. Now, where the extra slight amount of violence in the bolt carrier cycling comes through is because at 20 inches with original ball C2 powder, which you guys know today is BLC2, it was one of the first powders they used for 5.56, you achieved basically a complete, just about a complete, let's say 95 to 98% powder burn by the time you reach the end of the 20-inch muzzle. Okay? Now, the reason that rifle length gas systems are so soft shooting is because by the 12-inch mark, you've essentially not only burnt up approximately 70% of your powder, 80% of your powder, but the bullet has traveled far enough along that you have all that extra volume of barrel to lower the pressure, which is why the gun is so soft cycling. Conversely, that's why the carbine gas system is so reliable, though be it slightly more violent, is because by the time you hit the gas block, you don't have much more than about a 50% powder burn, and you only have 7 inches of bullet travel, so your expansion chamber is a lot smaller for that powder to explode, which is why it cycles so reliably, because it's got plenty of pressure to throw that bolt carrier all the way back to the rear, extract that cartridge, return, draw the next cartridge out of the magazine, and rechamber and relock. Okay, so once you understand all of that, then you can see why. Now, I said for the SHTF rifle, I chose to go with a carbine gas system, personal preference. Now, when you're talking about a 3-gun rifle, you're talking about a sporting rifle, a match rifle, I would generally lean towards mid-length on a 16 or rifle length on an 18 for like a 3-gun rifle, because it'll be softer recoiling and it will be a little bit easier for your follow-up shots, because speed is the key in those type of competitions. So the faster you can get the rifle back on target, being that it's going to be a less violent explosion to the rear, that's what's going to help you out. Now, I did make a little chart. These are not exact numbers, but as you can see right here, so if you take regular 55 grain ball, at 20 inches you're at 3150, 18 running around 3000, 14.5 you can still get 2750, 2550 at 10.5, 2300 at 8 inch. Would I ever use an 8-inch AR barrel? Absolutely not. But why is that important to know? Because if you look at the curve, if you look at the velocity curve of inches of barrel per velocity, it's basically a violent upward curve, and then it's a slow climb from 8 inches on. Okay, so basically it'll look really, really rapid, and then 8 inches on it starts to taper off, and then you just slowly gain velocity per inch of barrel. So that's important to know, because like I said, not that I would ever use an 8-inch barrel, but that's why at a minimum the carbine gas system is so effective, right? Because that's when you've attained a 50-60% powder burn, and you're going to have enough driving force going through the gas tube to actually unlock the lugs. Okay. Now, another thing to consider is why you say couldn't use why the dissipators had issues. If you guys remember the dissipators, 16-inch barrel with a 12.5-inch gas system. The reason why those things had reliability issues, or the reason why if you went with a mid-length gas system on a 10.5, mid-length gas system is about 9-inch. And if you were to try and do that on a 10.5, what would happen is by the time you even got enough gas pressure back, however many milliseconds that travel takes to start unlocking the lugs, the bullet would have already left the muzzle and dropped pressure so sufficiently in this system, in this sealed system, because the bullet is essentially acting as a gas check while it's doing that. By the time it was able to unlock the lugs, this pressure would drop because the muzzle end would be open, and you wouldn't have enough driving force to actually take that bolt carrier back. So generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, it's a whole lot of math that goes into figuring this out, okay? But generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, you want an absolute minimum 7 inches, 6 to 7 inches would be preferred. Absolute minimum 4.5 inches past the gas block to attain any sort of usable dwell time. That's why about the shortest barrel you'll see is a 13.7 on a mid-length gas system. So when it comes to your next build and choosing your barrel, just kind of understand how all that works and what you're looking for, okay? The rifle length system, because of the length of the barrel and because of the length of the gas tube and how far the gas has to travel to even begin unlocking the lugs, it's obviously going to have the lowest cyclic rate, okay? It's going to be the smoothest shooting. And then as you work your way back, then you're going to get a faster cyclic rate, slightly more reliability, but you're also going to have slightly more violence in the action. So just things to consider. And I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anything that I wanted to add. Oh, gas port size, that's why that's very important. Don't ever go with a purposely undergassed barrel. I had an undergassed barrel that I went all the way down to a carbine buffer and it still wouldn't cycle. Okay? Still wouldn't cycle. It was absolutely just putrid to work with. It's always easier to tune gas down than it is to, well, it's impossible to tune it up. What's coming out of your gas port is what's coming out of your gas port. So if I had to choose, I would always go, for reliability reasons, I would always lean slightly on the side of an overgassed, mildly overgassed weapon. And then that's when your adjustable gas blocks would come in handy. Even though we all know, or most of us know, that Criterion barrels are generally always perfectly gassed. That's why, I don't know if you can kind of tell, but on the 11.5, I have the Superlative Arms adjustable bleed-off gas block, because this 11.5, as you could tell, is pretty much run suppressed full-time. So, comes in handy. I have not particularly seen good luck with suppressor-optimized bolt carriers, if that's what you're looking for. I do have one buddy that runs them, and he swears by them, but I believe that was a CMC. Aside from that brand, I haven't seen any suppressor optimized bolt carriers that actually function properly. And I've always seen the most luck with going with an adjustable gas block on a mildly overgassed barrel, especially the bleed off type. I know that the stuff came in to pin pin the gas block to the barrel. And I was gonna try and get you guys a little parts list. Essentially the way we would do this is we would just find a place on the gas block low that would barely nip the barrel, dimple the barrel, install the gas block properly, and once we were after test fire, we gotta know that it's gonna work. When we're ready to dimple the barrel, what we would do is actually chuck it up in, we just use a drill press, okay? Chuck it up in a drill press, find our index mark where we wanna drill our pin, okay? I generally like to use 1/8. So hopefully this little parts list will help you guys and I can explain it to you. Obviously I covered up my address, but you can get all this from McMaster Car. For everything it comes out to maybe $80. But essentially if you are wanting to pin your own gas blocks, you can do it in a drill press by starting with a square cut end mill. I do 1/8 inch. And once you get a flat spot, because an end mill will cut a nice flat spot even in a curved side of a gas block, once you start it with the end mill, if your gas block has been dimpled and properly locked down, and you have your flat spot cut with the end mill, then switch to your carbide drill bit, lots of cutting oil, blow out the chips, run it real slow, and just run it clear all the way through the other side. What we chose to do instead of roll pins was taper pins, so we also got a square shank reamer. We got the narrow end starting at 0.1137, which is slightly smaller than an 1/8 inch, and the heavy end being at 0.1462. which is slightly greater than 1/8 of an inch. And then we're just going to run our 2/0 stainless 18/8 stainless steel taper pins. And always, 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 if you're going to get a taper pin reamer, let me see if I have one in here. This is actually a tap. I had to recut some threads on something, but always get a tap handle and get the one that you can do by hand. So take a tap handle. Obviously, this one's way too big for that. I'm going to have to get a smaller one. But take a tap handle and cut that taper into that system. Cut that taper into that system by hand, really slow, so you don't overdo it. And then just put it on a chunk of wood or your gas block jig, and just hammer that taper pin on down until she's nice and snug. I hope this explanation of the gas system kind of helps, and why certain gas port or gas system length to barrel combinations do and don't work. And also to understand, if you've been leaning towards a piston system, why you're saving a little bit of cleanliness, but not a whole lot, because you're going to cause more violence to the bolt carrier, because you're basically just slapping the bolt carrier into the unlock position before it explodes to the rear, and you're still not saving yourself all the gas that's going to come out of the back of the chamber that's going to drive that bolt carrier and cause that cartridge to eject. So like I said, I know it's a terrible diagram. I know some of you guys know all of this stuff already, but I've heard enough people try and tell me otherwise, that it's just that little gas tube that drives your whole bolt carrier back, and that's just not the case. Anyway, hope this helps. I'll have a lot more coming, so I hope you guys like and subscribe. I was going to do kind of one technical video per weekend, and then one fun video. So shortly here I should be posting something that's just fun, old historical guns or just cool stuff. So hope to see you guys soon. Thanks.